Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Johnson, The Last Nighters. And The Last Nighters can be found on the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. Tonight is going to be episode 91 of The Last Nighters. You can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/91. And we're going to be doing Spirited Away as we welcome back a guest from a while ago. He is Olof the Anarcho Viking, and he claims that this movie is so awesome that he's watched it at least 20 times. Spirited Away is an award-winning visual masterpiece with a coming-of-age story fused with the Shinto religion. So if we were doing like a restaurant menu, I'd call it Asian fusion cuisine, if you will. And well, it's not exactly great for young kids, which I had thought it might be until Wife Unit and I started watching it. We're like, oh, the kids would probably not really enjoy this. They'd have nightmares. Granted, they are only 4 and 6. But it is an interesting and somewhat confusing movie that I'm hoping that our guest and Robert can enlighten me on and help me to appreciate. So, Olof, welcome to the show. You were our guest for the Outlaw King a while back, and that show was lastnighters.com/50, and you brought a little bit of that Triple H heat to that discussion. So welcome back.
Oh, yes. Thank you. It's great to be back. Again, totally different movie, but, we do everything.
Yeah. And in fact, we were hoping to have you back a few months ago.
Right.
We had it all booked up for the Truman Show, and some event happened and it fell through. Yeah. So one of our multi-time guests, Mike C, filled in, and I think he did an admirable job. But we do really enjoy having you back, and so thank you for joining us and for recommending this movie.
Yeah, no problem. I hope you'll be able to appreciate it somewhat more. I mean, I think it's a great movie, but you have to watch it a few times. I think when you start really seeing what's going on with the different characters, it becomes much. You get more depth into what's happening. It can be a little superficial in the beginning, but there's a lot going on there. So
okay, well, I think that take is probably in line with my viewing. Like, unfortunately, because of the nature of how my wife and I watch movies, this was broken out over 3 different nights. Mm-hmm. And it was a first time viewing, and we're like, wow, it feels like I'm on some kind of an acid trip. And I don't understand what's going on. So yeah, I think multiple viewings might be something that would be required to really make sense of this. So hopefully this discussion will help flesh that out a bit. Before we get into the Google description, which is usually how we start these off, Robert, any comments thus far before we get into that?
Well, it sounds like we have another Batman versus Superman situation on our hands, Dan. Sounds like we've got a movie that on first watch, with a superficial understanding of, might not be able to get the most out of it, but with an expert on hand and repeated viewings, we may be witnessing a masterpiece by good old Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli. I know this is a film that got quite a bit of acclaim when it came over to the States back in 2001. I don't know how it was really well received in Japan in the years previous to this, and then it got a decent release from Disney, as I recall, back in the day. But it's kind of maintained its appeal. I watched it again furiously today in preparation for the show because I have been moving and everything is in boxes and whatever. And I had this DVD copy, and I've got 4 different DVD players on hand. And in fact, I tried it out in 6 different DVD players. Not a single one of them would play the thing.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Is that the copyright protection? Is like a region 3 disc and you're on region 1 players or something?
It was for US only.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know what the problem was. The disc 2 bonus disc worked just fine, but every time I put the disc 1 in, it wouldn't even recognize it as a DVD. So I don't know what the problem was, but luckily I was able to watch it. And so, yeah, we're here to discuss it. I've seen the movie before several times, but it had been probably at least 15 years since I'd seen it. It was good to get refreshed. All
right. Sounds good. Well, let's get into the Google description, and then Olof, you can make us appreciate the nuance of this, I think. So here we go. Spirited Away, 2001 fantasy/mystery, 2 hours and 5 minutes. 8.6 on that IMDb, 96% Metacritic, 97% Rotten Tomatoes, and 96% Google users like it. So it has pretty much universal acclaim, and I believe it won a couple of Academy Awards and did really well in the box office in addition to that. The description is, in this animated feature by noted Japanese director Hayao Miyazaki, and I know I butchered that. 10-year-old Chihiro and her parents stumble upon a seemingly abandoned amusement park. After her mother and father are turned into giant pigs, Chihiro meets the mysterious Haku, who explains that the park is a resort for supernatural beings who need a break from their time spent in the earthly realm, and that she must work there to free herself and her parents. In the U.S., it was released August 31st, 2002. Disney and John Lasseter were integral in bringing this to the United States. And I read somewhere that they actually rewrote the film to align the English words with the Japanese animation. So like the words were originally, the animation was tied to the words in Japanese. And so when they wrote the film for the US, they used the movements of the mouths and they reworded it in English to line up. So it doesn't have that Kung Fu style, my dragon style, beat your tiger style kind of stuff from American Pie, I believe. So Robert, let's go to you with your reaction to this. And then we will go to Olaf for the explanations.
Well, yeah, it is a movie that you notice a whole lot of symbolism. You see like the three headless, the three heads, and you see, I don't know, just all the different creatures that, like the water dragons and stuff like that. And you're going, well, I know this is like Japanese folklore and things like that, but you don't necessarily know, I don't know how literal they're being or how true to the history they're being, or if they're kind of taking it off in their own direction. I don't know. So it'll be interesting to hear from Olaf about that. Personally, this is not my favorite Ghibli film. I think my first Ghibli film I ever saw was My Neighbor Totoro back in the day when I was introduced to these guys. But I've seen almost all of their stuff. They're a talented studio that has produced a lot of excellent stuff. My favorite probably being Princess Mononoke, followed by probably Howl's Moving Castle and, I don't know, a bunch of other ones. But this one is, I recognize how well made this movie is, but it's not quite up my alley. So it's interesting that it's up Olaf's alley, right perfectly square, hitting the strikes. So I want to hear from him just the themes that he saw and, just his impression of the whole thing. Maybe a little background if he knows any of that on, the Shinto stuff and all that. So.
Yeah. So Olaf, over to you, because I didn't know what the Shinto was going on in this thing, so I was a bit confused. But it sounds like repeated viewings with a little bit of an underlying understanding of the story itself. Then the nuance comes out. Then you understand what the characters represent and how they interact.
Yeah. Well, let's take even a further step back and kind of you have to appreciate where he's coming from, Miyazaki, because it's pretty clear that almost all of his movies are inspired by an underlying ideology. So which sometimes overlap with what we believe in, but sometimes it doesn't. But I appreciate seeing that coming out of his movies. So just for instance, in 2003, he was invited to Academy Awards in Los Angeles. I think it was the 75th year. He rejected it on the grounds that the United States had troops in Iraq, and he did not want to visit a country that was bombing Iraq. So I think that was a very, principled stance of him to take. And so I appreciate a lot of his opinions and stances on issues like this. His dad was an aircraft designer in World War II as well, and he saw the horrors of World War II growing up in Japan because his country was bombed. And he's also an environmentalist. You can see that clearly in the movies. And there's some themes in the movie that is very, very much striking environmentalistic. And the Shinto stuff also shows, obviously, with just the phenomena that exist, such as the spirits in the first place, and they always have a connection to nature, usually. And you see this in the movie with two things. For instance, Haku himself is a river spirit, but he has been robbed of his past because of the dry out of his river and the then subsequent buildings that were put on top of it. So he can't remember where he is from, so he can't find his way home. But he's a river spirit. The other spirit also that we see in the movie, the more troubling one, where really the environmentalism kind of comes forth, is with what they believe first, or the witch that rules the bathhouse, Yubaba, they first thought that this was a stink spirit because it came and it smelled really bad, and they assigned this particularly undesired guest to Chihiro and her mentor Lynn in the bathhouse. But it turns out it's not a stink spirit. It's also a river spirit that has been collecting all the garbage that was put into his river, and now he's coming to relieve this garbage that were dumped on his river, in his river.
All right, hold on. This is No Face?
No. This is the stink spirit. The muddy, slimy, grimy, big brown ball of just mud and stink that comes in and slides through the halls in the bathtub and turns. The rice just rots in the bowl when he approaches the Lynn. They're standing there with the rice balls, and they just turn black and brown and rots away. And it's when Chihiro managed to refill the tub because No Face has given her all the tokens. So she's managing to put him. He goes into the bathtub. It doesn't do anything. It just turns everything to a big muddy pile of filth. And she's struggling. She needs to get the water running again because she thinks, okay, this is just dirt and slime and mud that needs to come off. But it's not. He has a thorn in him, you see. So, and when it's like a big abscess being released. And so they all help to pull out this thorn in his side, and out comes all this garbage from the river that this spirit inhabits. So he goes there and releases, and you can see all the junk just being displayed on the floor. And Shintoism is very concerned with the human's relationship to the environment. And Japan has it's always they have a deep respect for certain different aspects of nature, and usually there are spirits that are connected with the different aspects in the nature as well, and therefore they treat it with very much gentleness and respect. And Miyazaki's criticism of this comes forth when he shows this. I suspect he's criticizing humans for the pollution of the environment. I don't know what his prescriptions would have been in terms of policy regarding such a problem, and that's probably where we might disagree with him. I don't know. I just suspect that that's the case, that he probably is somebody who favors intervention by the state to protect these environmental phenomena.
Right.
So,
or potentially culturally, like by respecting Shinto religion, which I think that would be almost a market type force.
Exactly. And it is in Japan to a very large extent. You see people living in very much in harmony with nature. It's always respected. People don't pollute. They don't litter on the street. You can see this in Japan when you go. It's spotless, clean everywhere. People just don't litter. It's not what they do.
Yet they seem to have some kink up there.
Right. But it is. So these themes are showing in the movie, in Haku himself, in the sludgy stink spirit that turns out was not a stink spirit, it's a river spirit, and the way that is shown, I think really shows where Miyazaki is coming from an ideological perspective, and I find that very interesting. So that's a very big thing that I think people should appreciate with the movie. It's sort of like his environmentalism is coming forward, and whether or not you agree with it or something, you can still see that, the way he's doing it, the way he's displaying it, really is, it's convincing and it's striking. The visuals of it comes forward, and it's I think it's very well done.
So now Haku was also a river spirit, but kind of like the opposite spectrum of this blob monster. So is that like a yin yang thing going on, or am I like oversimplifying?
He is a river spirit, but he is not plagued by the same problem. His problem is that he has nowhere to go back to.
Because his river disappeared because of development, right?
And it dried out. So, and the development was put on top of it. So I guess that is also kind of an abuse, if you will, quote unquote, on his where he the river that he inhabited. But I don't know, because it says that it dried up and then the development came on top, or it was vice versa. That's not very clear.
Are we saying that Miyazaki is criticizing urbanization, or
right? Perhaps he is. Yes, that is what I'm trying. But it's not that is not very, very clear though. I suspect that he's yes.
Yeah, because I could see it. I mean, the way he did it and used this environmental things as story devices.
Yeah,
it didn't seem like it was beating you over the head with environmentalism. It was more a way of just kind of just showing you, hey, these are the spirits, and this is what happens when this happens. And
but the scene with the spirit with the thorn in its side being unlocked, and out comes this garbage. That is just that's kind of like that's in your face a little bit. But other than that, there are other things too. But I think that is probably the most striking point he's making there regarding environmentalism.
Okay.
I do think it's powerful, but it's very well done.
Well, before I interrupted Robert, I think you had something to say, and then I want to take us back towards the beginning of the movie. So, Robert.
Yeah, no, what was it? Oh, Robert wanted to say yes. No, sorry. Yeah.
I don't remember what I was going to say. Sorry, guys. We moved on. The conversation moved on, and my brain moved on too.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's how I operate as well. Well, so I want to go more towards the beginning of the film where, what's her name? Chihiro finds herself in this situation. And this is one of the reasons why I thought you had suggested this movie, because it seems to focus on work ethic and providing value and having determination to make sure that you don't accept rejection, and that you're going to do something that's going to be valuable to someone else. Right.
Yeah. Yes.
And so
that is true. Mm-hmm.
And we've also got the contract situation where the witch takes the name of the person, has them sign a contract, and then basically controls them, or they're like an indentured servant to her, and she makes them do her bidding, or the jobs like cleaning the big stink monster. Like that was the low man on the totem pole job, and they gave it to her because she was a human and everyone else was a spirit of some sort. And actually, they said, I think they actually said that humans stunk, and it would be a few days of them, her needing to eat their food before her stink would go away.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm.
But was that one of the reasons why? I mean, the contracts and the, being industrious and being determined, was that one of the lessons that you drew from this? Or
absolutely, yes, that is definitely a theme that I think is very libertarian. Her personal development in the movie is very interesting, because in the beginning she's just little wimp who just sits and whines, and it starts already in the car. She's just this kid is whining, and just say, oh, this is like we see these kids all the time, right? They're just whining and they're spoiled brats.
Oh right, yeah. I remember they were driving by and they're like, "There's your new school," and she's like, "Fuck school."
Yeah, exactly, right. And she's like sticking out her tongue to the school. And she's still a little scary cat, in the beginning. She's afraid. She doesn't want to take initiative. She's terrified, but she little by little she grows into this really courageous person that has really taken personal responsibility and is now responsible for a lot of things that is going on, and saving herself and saving Haku and saving her parents. She has a lot of responsibility on her shoulders that almost takes her down in the beginning. It almost breaks her, and it kind of breaks her until Haku manages to give her that the food with the spell on that gives her strength back, and from there it's all moving upward again. After she goes down to the pigsty and can't really Haku shows her where this is where your parents are. They're not pigs because of their gluttonous behavior, which is another theme, gluttony.
I actually can I pause you there and let's pick on the pigs for a moment.
Yeah,
because I want to talk about like the implied consent contract that is partaken when somebody enters a restaurant and you order food, you have not yet paid for it, and there's an understated understanding that they're not going to charge you like $500 for the coffee, at least not for another 10 years, right? When inflation like really takes hold here. but like you've agreed to the coffee, but in a reasonable priced amount. Like they can't present you the bill for like an astronomical price. And I found that, when the parents found this food stand, they're like, well, there's all this food here, and it's a restaurant type thing, and there's nobody here, but we're hungry. So we're going to start eating. And they even mentioned that they're willing to pay for it, but because no one's here, they're going to pay for it. So they're accepting this obligation or this contractual arrangement. But they didn't accept the consequence of that, where they're turned into pigs,
right?
Because they're like, it's some kind of magical spell or something, or is this like an entrapment that's happening with the witch who's like, why is this happening? Basically, like what ends up with, why are the parents enticed into eating this food, and why is it like a Hansel and Gretel type situation where they're sort of accepting something unknowingly, and so then they're under this spell, which that would not be a contract, right? Like they did not have full understanding of what they were agreeing to. But can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's weird, because obviously that kind of spell and punishment is kind of over the top for taking the food, or quote unquote stealing the food. There wasn't anybody there, so obviously if there's nobody there to seat you and serve you, you should probably not eat the food. And it's extra delicious because it's not from this world; it's from a different world. But I think what he wants to emphasize here again is this the theme of gluttony and greed that he sort of wants to play on. That they just sit there and they just stuff themselves, and it's just this disgusting thing where they just eat like pigs, and therefore they get to be turned into pigs by stealing the foods from the spirits.
But they weren't stealing it, though, at least not in a libertarian ethic. They were agreeing to pay for it. Like that was their understanding. However, I will throw out there that there is a potential scenario where that food is intended for an event, like a wedding or something. And just because it's there doesn't mean you can just start eating it and expect it to be a restaurant. But if what you're saying is how do you say his name? Miyazaki?
Yes, Miyazaki.
Miyazaki is saying that they're being gluttonous and they're stealing the food, and the punishment therefore is they become pigs, or they're put under this spell or whatever. Then I guess I would disagree with the premise, but it makes sense in the film.
Yeah, I mean, the point I think he's making is that they are behaving and eating like pigs. Therefore, the proper thing to do there is to just turn them into pigs. I mean, there's no rationale behind that except for just symbolism. The punishment does not correspond with the type of crime, if there ever was one committed. I mean, yes, you can. If I walk in somewhere and there's nobody there, and there's nobody working there, and I see nobody, I wouldn't just start eating the food. It's kind of like weird that they did that, but you can hear them clearly say, "I'm willing to pay for the food."
Right, right. And here we can talk a little bit about punishment theory, where the punishment needs to be commensurate with the crime.
Exactly.
Or
it's
proportional.
not. Yeah, it's not. So they entered a different world, a different paradigm that doesn't really respond to human rationale the way we think. So, and you see that how all the spirits are treated too. I mean, they're essentially slaves to Yubaba. I mean, Kamaji, the Boiler Man.
Yeah, the spider
you remember
guy?
The Boiler Man? I mean, he is working there as a slave, essentially, day in and day out, to produce the water for the bathhouse.
Right. Now I want to mention one thing, that there appears to be an echo or another yin yang situation with the gluttony and the parents.
Right.
Because it's played out again with No Face, or
yeah, absolutely,
where he's very gluttonous, but he's giving false wealth in response. Like it appears to be gold, and he's eating and eating and eating and getting,
he's printing money out of thin air. He's the Fed, essentially.
Yeah, and he's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But then once they go in to cash in those chips, right, then it's revealed that they're dirt or nothing. But that seems to be an echo of the parents' gluttony.
It kind of is, yes. And I think the interesting also thing about No Face, if we follow him right, I mean, he becomes more and more sort of this. He just grows and grows the more attention and the more stuff that he gets. And but he produces this thing, right? They think it's real gold, so he just keeps spitting it out, and they all get really, really greedy. And again, he wants to play him greedy here, Miyazaki. That the spirits themselves, when No Face, he eats them, right? He eats them too. they get consumed by their own greed. Essentially, I think that is what he wants to display here. And like you say, there is a correspondence to that and her parents being turned into pigs because of their own gluttony too. So No Face is, I mean, I don't know. I think No Face is probably the most important character to analyze if you want to analyze one of the characters in the movie. It's just there are a lot of stuff to No Face, but I want to see what you or Robert have to say before I go on.
Yeah, let's go to Robert for a minute. I know we've talked about a lot, so you've probably had a few ideas and then they've gone away and been replaced by something new, but what do you have at the moment?
Well, I would have to say that, No Face is the most mysterious and interesting character in the whole film. He's definitely someone where you're like not exactly sure what's going on. And I would say you don't ever really find out. I'm kind of used to these Miyazaki films or this Japanese storytelling where nothing's ever fully quite resolved. It's just kind of like the story keeps going, but it stops. And so we leave No Face at Baba Yaga or Yaga. What's her name? Sorry.
Yeah, the sister, the good sister, the good witch. Yeah,
there seems to be. What was that theme? The good witch, and then there's the bad witch, but the twin sisters. There's a lot of interesting themes in this movie. I also really enjoyed the name magic theme because names are really powerful to people. Like hearing your own name is kind of like a magical thing. And throughout fantasy and history, really, a lot of this name magic keeps coming up. And it really shows in this film where, getting control of somebody by speaking their true name, like you can control demons by knowing their true name. And then it's also like the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their true name. So it's a lot of fun stuff in this one. But Olaf, I really do want to hear what you had to say about No Face.
Yeah. So I think No Face is this. It's very hard to. I want to draw parallels, No Face, with something else. And on one side, he's this false thing, right? That produces fake wealth. I mean, he's like, imagine the Federal Reserve printing money out of thin air. So he just drops gold that isn't really gold. It's turns out to be worthless. But they accept it, right, as money, and you think that they're really, really rich, and then it just blows up in their face, and it turns out that it's useless. And he's this thing that keeps inflating. The more and more he gets more and more powerful. And you really want that. And I think that's sort of the thing that the more you continue, the bigger, more powerful he will become. So the best thing would be to just eradicate No Face altogether. It's like. But they don't do that. They can't really do that for some reason. Chihiro manages to save No Face to go back to this powerless sort of wimpy little spirit at the end when she feeds him this hard medicine that makes him just throw up everything and just becomes like small and slim again and kind of powerless. But it makes me think of sort of the minarchist position on government, right? Well, let's just take away all the power, but let's leave a little bit here. But No Face, given the nature of No Face, and we don't see this because the movie doesn't end, and the movie ends before we don't know what's going to happen to No Face, right? But given what we have seen in the movie, what stops No Face from becoming that thing again? I mean, there just seems to have this in him.
Right, that's the Alex Jones 1776 reset.
Yeah, right, exactly. so yes, we can reset No Face to this small thing again, a tiny government, but government's just going to grow and become more powerful and become this beast again that just consumes and takes and loots
and wishes to do harm. Like it's going after Chihiro until it becomes small again.
Yes, exactly. And Chihiro is the only one that manages to take on No Face.
Right. And there's another echo in here, and that's with the growth of Chihiro's bravery and her development as a character, because she goes down those very same stairs on the outside of the building that Haku first tells her to go down to meet the Boilerman, and she's very timid about it because there's no railing, it's very steep, and it looks like you're going to fall off. She's very scared of this. Yeah. But then later, when she's running from No Face after giving him the bitter medicine, and he's vomiting and whatever, but chasing her and trying to kill her, she just glides down that stuff. She is agile and fearless and escapes far enough to where No Face loses his power to cause harm. And then she's gracious to him.
Yeah,
she's
she takes him in again.
Yeah, you want to go on the train? Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the way. But no, you have to get rid of all the tumor, man. Get rid of the tumor completely. You can't leave a little bit; it's going to grow back.
Right. Yeah. My favorite argument with the minarchist, and it's a little bit vulgar, but I'm like, okay, so you want to eliminate most rape, but not all. Okay.
Right. Exactly. No, it's that's how I could see No Face from our perspective. That's how I analyzed No Face in the movie. Now, I think most people who do watch the movie probably have analyzed No Face differently, and there are many ways to do it, but that's really how I saw him. No Face, this monster, just became more powerful and more frightening and more dangerous the more you gave him.
Right.
Now, definitely I see your analogy of No Face being the Fed or a government.
Right.
But that can't. I'd be shocked if that was Miyazaki's intent.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is. I think No Face is the representation of greed. That is what it is. And then the people who gather and is attracted to No Face because of the gold, and then they get consumed, like he eats a few of them. They get consumed by their own greed. That's what he wanted to say, in my opinion. That's the message I think he's trying to put forth.
Right. Now they set up the situation with No Face offering all this gold, with the Stink Monster also being a paying customer.
Yeah.
So even though he's grotesque and stinks really badly, money spent, and they're willing to take him and give him the bathhouse treatment because he's willing to pay. He's a paying customer. So this goes into the whole, how would the free market handle racism?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go on.
Right. So you can have people could be racist and not wish to have certain customers, but they're only doing themselves harm because they're pushing that revenue away. Right.
Right. I mean, racism is a non-issue in the free market.
Right. Or if it is, you're paying for it. But it's a
non-issue. You as an entrepreneur, you as a business owner, are the ultimate person who will suffer from this.
Right.
People might be sad to get turned away, but I mean, what is the public's response? I mean, racism isn't very popular. Like, I'm sorry, it just isn't. Like, if you are this racist business owner who's going to turn people away for whatever reason, then I think the public will respond pretty negatively to something like that. I mean,
we see this all the time with the cancel culture thing, and I think that goes too far.
Right.
But yeah, I think that people who would turn away others based on whatever criteria are doing themselves a disservice.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
And
because for every consumer dollar that's out there, there are thousands of businesses that want that dollar and are vying for that dollar.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. You're hurting yourself and just gifting that money to your competitors.
Right. So the racist bears the direct cost of their racism, and that will minimize it, right, rather than subsidize it. And I don't know where this quote's from. I think it's from a movie, but he's like, I don't see color, black, white, whatever. All I see is green. Where he's like, I'm just going to look at, who's willing to pay for my service. I don't care.
Right. And capitalism gets blamed for human greed, and how terrible it is to really accentuate or whatever, play on the worst things of humanity. But greed, I mean, it's the quote from Wall Street that greed is good, but greed absolutely brings out the best in people when they value the dollar more than they, hate the race or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, if you channel the greed correctly, you will channel it to serve your fellow man. But if you channel the greed in the government, you will do a lot of harm and a lot of damage to people. So that is the difference. If you greed in the free market, you have to still produce something that people want, or else you can't survive. But if you greed in the government, you can just take, and that's fine. So, I mean, I guess that's the different. Greed will be channeled in ways that are beneficial to mankind in the marketplace.
So it's one of the great tragedies of history that robber barons are known as robber barons. These great industrialists that provided so much value to so many people and made so many great services so inexpensive and available to the poorest of people. And they're known and demonized throughout history. It's really terrible.
All they did was improve the standard of living and lower costs and increase quality and quantity and availability of their product.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, but what is interesting though, I think, I just looking at Miyazaki recently in 2016, I don't think he endorsed. I think he had bad things to say about both the candidates that ran. So he said Trump was terrible. He said Hillary Clinton is also terrible. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, he didn't really take a side there either.
That was my take as well.
Yeah. So he's not just somebody who will like play team sports. Like, he has some kind of philosophy with what he's doing. He's not just blindly going, say, Orange Man. He's not the NPC guy. That's what I think makes him admirable. And he is staunchly anti-war. Which I think is really nice.
So could I throw this out there, that it's government or statism that enables racism to continue to persist?
Yeah.
And perhaps that could be an angle to attack statism in some way.
Yeah. I mean, if you just see what, the way they spun it, right? I mean, the state was the enabler and the enforcer of the Jim Crow laws, for instance.
And the fugitive slave laws.
Yeah, well, so Jim Crow is like more recent, so that people will probably have But yes, you're absolutely right. And then you get the civil rights movement and everything, and it gets outlawed, and then the state takes credit for it. It takes credit for outlawing segregation when he was enabling it and enforcing it in the first place.
Right, but they overcorrect because now they're forcing association.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, they should never have enforced and enabled anything in the first place. And now they go in and they write the Civil Rights Act, which allows the state, again, to go in and take over private property. So they never let the market work. They screw things up. And then when there's something to take credit for, even though I disagree with the 9th point there, which allowed government to go in and take over private property, so I would not have signed on to the Civil Rights Act. But then they go and take credit for it. It's just so, I mean.
Yeah, well, that's their way. They take the credit for all the good things that come from free market and voluntary interaction. Right. And then they demonize the free market when anything bad happens as a result of their multitude of interventions that beget additional interventions.
Yeah, no, it's ironic. No self-awareness at all.
Yeah, you have people responding to the incentives created by these ridiculous interventions, and that's what's going to happen. And then, like you said, government just demonizes them for it. It's like, you're the ones that created the incentives to do this. It's like when the 2008 crash, when the government was guaranteeing all these crappy loans, all these ninja loans and everything else.
Yeah.
And then the market crashes, and they're like, look at how terrible these bankers are.
Yeah, and they call for more regulation, right? Which inevitably makes it very expensive to comply. So where's the small business owner usually go when he wants a loan to expand his business? He goes to the local community bank. Now those community banks are going to be reduced by the thousands because they can no longer afford to comply. So all these regulations just benefits the big ones are already there and wants to shield themselves from competition.
Yeah, the regulatory capture and the self-interest of the players with the stake, right?
Yeah,
it's like Walmart saying the minimum wage is great. Well, they can comply with that. They can afford it.
Exactly. Yeah, and they would be exactly. And anything else that allows people to compete with them food-wise, any kind of food regulatory burden or other things like that. Yeah, no, it's depressing.
All right. So one final thing, and we get back to the movie a little bit. But Robert, you mentioned that they were called ninja loans, which was like no income, no assets, or no job. Mm-hmm. Could they use that term today, or would that be considered cultural appropriation and racist and evil and the worst thing ever?
Not when they do it. Just when some rando does it, then someone can get outraged on Twitter about it.
Right. Did you see this guy in? I want to say it was in Iowa. He was showcased on like a college football game, and he had his Venmo handle listed on there, and so people were like donating him money for like beer or whatever. And Anheuser-Busch and Venmo both like jumped on this because it became this viral sensation. And he was going to donate like $1 million that was raised from this to a hospital for kids or something. And then some jackass reporter looks back 8 years at some tweet the kid did when he was 16, and it was like potentially racist. And then Anheuser-Busch cancels it, and they're like running this guy through the coals like he's the worst person ever, when he's donating $1 million to a hospital.
Yeah, didn't that backfire on them though? I mean, that was kind of crazy.
Like, yeah, it did because the reporter actually had worse shit in his timeline.
It's amazing. Soon you're gonna be able to you go to a job interview and they're gonna sit and dig up tweets from 20 years ago and see if you potentially said something homophobic, something like that.
Yeah. This tattletale culture is just pathetic.
It is.
It is the ultimate in pathetic playground bullshit from a bunch of children, and this is what passes for adult interaction these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's coming from the left too, almost exclusively. So it's very bad.
All right, well, let's get back to the movie. I know we diverted for like the last 10 minutes or so, but I've noticed there's a bunch of echoes in here, and I think I've kind of brought it up, some yin and yang stuff and some like things that are brought up and then sort of brought up again. And I'm not sure where I want to go because we are kind of needing to start winding down a little bit here. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about more of the development of Chihiro and how she rediscovers her power or her ability, because she's given a final test at the end to kind of like dissolve the contract that she was duped into signing, and her parents were duped into being under this spell because they accepted this food and were punished for it. But can we get into like what developed within her to be able to pass this final test?
Yeah, I mean, I can go. I mean, I think you see, like I said before, throughout the entire movie, you see a display of the change of character of Chihiro that goes from little wimp crybaby to a person with courage, a person with confidence, and that is exceptionally displayed in the final test. She just has more confidence in herself and her ability to do things. She learns these sort of, it's almost a lesson in ethical and moral behavior and work ethic and everything that is involved in her becoming this strong personality that she ultimately is, and a hero really for saving her parents. And I think a lot of that has to do with her strive and her fight is embedded in her love for Haku, for something that she can't really remember, but something that is still within her subconsciously. Her love for Haku that keeps her going and fighting and becoming better and better. And ultimately, she does remember. And that is one of the best moments in the whole film, in my opinion, when she remembers where Haku is coming from, and that releases Haku from his shackles too. So she saves everybody, ultimately.
Yeah,
and Haku was the one carrying her up to becoming this person, and she ultimately is the payback and saves him too.
So it was a little confusing to me, this whole situation, because Lin tells her not to trust Haku because Haku is under the spell of Yubaba.
Yep, that's true.
Haku tells her things that actually do lead her to this discovery, right?
Yep.
So how much control did she have over him, and was he actually helping her, or was Lin correct in warning Chihiro not to listen to him?
Yubaba had 100% control over Haku because Haku could not remember his name. It was just Haku. His real name was not Haku. It was Kohaku, the Kohaku River. And that is what ultimately releases him from his shackles, because when he remembers his name, he was then freed from his enslavement to Yubaba.
Right, but he did give information to Chihiro, and Lin told her to not listen to him. But she did the things that Haku told her, and it worked out.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. But Haku was still doing dirty work on the side, stealing from Yubaba's sister. But I think he was ultimately a good person. It's just that he didn't have much choice for being tied to Yubaba under a spell.
So are you saying that this was 4D chess, that Haku was doing Yubaba's bidding, yet was still able to slip the information as needed, like 4chan might, or what's it called?
But what information? No, I'm a little. I'm not following exactly what information.
So initially, Haku told Chihiro, like, right, hold your breath going across the bridge, and then find this guy, the spider dude, and ask for a job and don't take no for an answer.
Yeah,
and then start working for Yubaba.
Yeah.
So maybe that was it. Maybe that was just to get her to be under the contract with Yubaba.
Oh, yeah. You can't. I mean, Chihiro would have not survived. Chihiro would have been turned into something else, an animal or something useless. But if you get the job, and Yubaba can't say no. Yubaba is not able to say no. She took an oath. So she can't give no to an answer for somebody who insists on asking her for a job in the bathhouse. Ultimately, she is tied. She has a spell on herself, kind of.
So Haku was doing Yubaba's bidding, but it just happened to backfire.
No, I'm not following now.
So Haku was doing Yubaba's bidding, and Haku was telling Chihiro to not take no for an answer.
Right.
Because Yubaba has to say yes.
Yes.
And that would then enslave Chihiro to Yubaba with the contract, which was Yubaba's goal, but that ended up being Yubaba's downfall.
Well, I don't know if it was Yubaba's goal. I don't think Yubaba initially wanted to contract Chihiro and give her a job. I think she just wanted to make her disappear, or turn her into an animal or something like that, just like he did for her parents. But when she's under contract, she can no longer do that.
So why does Haku help her, and why does Lin tell Chihiro not to listen to Haku?
Well, there's a conflict between characters. So Haku, I think, knows what is best for Chihiro, and he genuinely wants to help her. I think that's clear. But he also is tied to his own spell, and he knows that. But he also knows what Yubaba's limits are. So he's trying to help Chihiro all the time. Lin, I think, just recognized that Yubaba goes and do this weird thing that Haku goes and do this weird thing for Yubaba, and she's just aware, and she tells Chihiro not to, hang out and listen to Haku. But I clearly Haku knows how to help Chihiro, or at least to make her survive in that environment, because without his help, that would never have happened. And otherwise, Yubaba would not have contracted Chihiro. She would not have given her a job at the bathhouse. She would have just gotten rid of her completely. That would have been the end of it.
Okay, I might need to watch it again and try to make sense of all of this.
Yeah. You have to. That's probably true. I mean, it's hard to get it the first time. There are many constraints put on character, and once you get to understand what they are, it makes more sense.
So what was the nature of the contract? Because Daniel used the turn of phrase where he said she's enslaved to this contract. Clearly, you can't voluntarily enslave yourself.
Right.
To the contract.
Well, here you could, man. This in this kingdom of the spirits of Yubaba, the Yubaba land, Yubaba kingdom. Everybody there were essentially slaves. They could not escape. You hear Lin also say at the point in the movie that one day I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get on that train. But nobody can get on that train because nobody has tickets, and nobody can escape because nobody remembers where they're coming from. Yubaba has stolen their names, and they are no longer able to get free from her, essentially. So
okay, so this is some sort of ensorceling contract. This this would not be a valid contract.
Oh no, it's completely invalid. It's well, unless you're Walter Block, perhaps, then he would make the argument that you can voluntarily enslave yourself. Then I'm sure he could try to explain why that's possible from a libertarian perspective, that you can voluntarily enter slavery. I don't know.
Well, you get to sing songs and all that stuff.
And sing songs. Slavery is not that bad. That's what was quoted in the New York Times later.
Yeah, that was pretty slanderous. We love Walter. We've had him on. We've interviewed him twice, and we're probably due to have him on again sometime. But, continue, Robert. I know you were going down a line here.
Oh no, you were wrong about that. No, I was just curious to talk about the contracts, because, like you said, I mean, libertarians, free markets, were all about contracts, and she breaks the spell at the end, and the contract disappears and breaks out. But any kind of valid contract would be completely voluntary on both parties. It's just an agreement for both parties to act in a certain way.
It's just she has no chance. She cannot escape, basically. So she's very much limited. Her only chance to survive is to enter servitude to Yubaba.
So there was never any promise of, because all she wants to do is to get her parents back and turn out pigs. Is there a promise by Yubaba that if Chihiro works in this bathhouse for a certain amount of time, she will do that?
No, there is no promise, any such promise. The only thing that exists that gives her hope is that Haku seems to always have that plan in mind. She always seems to want to help her to get free. and help her parents. So he is ultimately the one that makes, that pitch to Yubaba. You have to set her free, essentially.
Because he does tell Chihiro to, when he takes her to the stables, she's like, identify who your parents are and remember them, because
exactly.
it will be important later.
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of where my problem a little bit with the movie is. I mean, Chihiro is a great protagonist. She does all kinds of things. She solves all kinds of problems in the film. But it seems to be that the main problem is that her parents are pigs, and there should be some kind of clear path that she is trying to go on to get them to be returned to human form. And it seems like she just kind of lucks into it at the end. And I guess maybe that just leaves a tiny little bad taste in my mouth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, it's hard to see how it's going to play out exactly. There's no clear path to like saving the parents. That's it's always unclear what's actually going to happen.
Right, but that is
she's
her
solving all these. Yeah, she's solving all these little problems along the way, and ultimately she does accomplish her goal. But it seems like there should have been like some sort of clear step-by-step process or a path or something she was working towards to ultimately do that. Instead, it was, I'm going to solve this problem here. I'm going to solve Haku's problem. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and she solves the problem because there is a conflict that nobody notices until the end of the movie, and that is the moral ambiguity of the characters of Zeniba versus Yubaba, so the sisters. They're both kind of bad, but they're both redeemable characters at the end.
Why is Zeniba bad? I thought she was the good witch.
Well, she doesn't seem to be very... Yeah, she is the good witch, right? But she's very not friendly to Chihiro at all in the beginning, and she wants to kind of kill Haku for stealing the magic golden seal.
Right, but she did say that Haku tried to cut her in half, I think.
Oh, she did?
That was after. She cuts when she's just that little piece of paper. Haku chops her in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. But there is something to, Haku did. So they have an antagonistic relationship, right? Yubaba and Zeniba. And Haku does Yubaba's bidding. She goes and she steals the seal. And there's a magic spell attached to it so that anybody who has it will essentially die. But Chihiro managed to save Haku by giving her the remedy there from River Spirit.
Okay, so Zeniba and Yubaba are the yin-yang of each other, like identical yet opposites, and they even say that explicitly.
Precisely, yeah. But I think Yubaba is at the end kind of she redeems herself a little bit,
by fulfilling the contract.
Yeah, by acknowledging that she, did a challenge and she won and she should be set free, and she agreed. Ultimately, did that. So.
Yeah. So even the baby was like, "Don't do this final challenge." Let's talk about the baby. What does the baby represent?
Yeah, that's a very tricky one. I've been thinking about that one for a lot. It's really hard to understand what the baby represents. I personally don't exactly know how to interpret the baby. It's this obviously this sweet spot that she cares a lot about. She is very, very concerned. I think it's the only characters that she's concerned about. She pretty much despises and treats everybody like crap except the baby, right? The baby she's very gentle, very very kind to all the time. So it's sort of showing her good side in those few moments that she interacts with the baby. That's when you can see the human side of Yubaba.
I would say that it represents her vulnerability or her weakness.
Yeah.
Because tell me if I'm wrong, but the baby is what No Face falsifies. Not only does he make all this gold, but he makes a fake version of the baby out of the three-headed green dudes, or the three heads. No Face turns them into a representation of the baby, and then
No Face does. I thought the Good Witch did.
Yeah, the Zeniba did turn them into turn the three heads into a baby, and the baby turned into a rat, right?
Yeah, and the bird into a little fly or whatever.
Okay, all right. See, I thought that when the gold that No Face had offered up, and then Yubaba was like, "Well, this isn't enough to pay for the damage that has been caused," and then the gold turns into dirt.
Yeah.
So it's shown to be false. And then the baby moments later is shown to be false.
Yeah.
I thought that meant that No Face had done that. And that was
Oh, no, that was your Bob dispelling all the illusion spells that were active.
Okay. All right. It's starting to maybe make more sense. So, so this is one of the audience. This is one of those movies that you can watch, listen to us, and then watch again, and maybe it'll make more sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it probably, if you just hear us talking about the movie now, it's like, oh, what is this? You know, it seems like a very strange. No, it's there's a lot of stuff going on. I think it's hard to. I think you have to watch it a couple of times in order to really, really grasp the fundamental meaning of the series of events that lead up to certain things.
All right. Well, maybe you can do a summary of that with your score out of 10 on this, because we're at that time where we do the final summary and review. Unfortunately, I know that there's plenty more we could dive into because it is a bit ambiguous. There's a lot of symbolism here, and we can interpret things in certain ways, but we are at that time limit. So, Olaf, why don't you take it away? Give us the summary and review and the score out of 10, please.
Okay, yeah. So Chihiro is the little girl who are supposed to move with her parents to new town. They get sidetracked and eventually trapped in the land of spirits, or kami, that they were called in Japanese. Her parents get turned into pigs by being gluttons and eating the spirits' foods, and Chihiro then is set on a path to save herself, save her parents, and bring them back to the human world. But in the meantime, she does more than that while being in this different world. She ultimately saves her friend that saved her when she was a child. We didn't talk about Haku saving her from drowning when she was little. So she ends up being the hero of the movie and makes it back to the human world with her parents at the end. I think it's a very powerful movie. I don't perhaps agree with all the ideological points that Miyazaki is trying to make, but a lot of them I do, and I find them very beautifully illustrated. I find it to be a very complex story, very complex characters. They're morally ambiguous at times. You don't really know if they're good or bad, and if they are bad, they some of them are redeemable. So yeah, no, I will give it a solid 8.5.
All right, 8.5 for a movie that you said was so awesome you watched 20 times.
Yeah. It's I 10. I don't think I can ever give somebody a 10. I mean, there's always some stuff. I'll say 8.5. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, and also thank you for the deep dive and explanation of your understanding of this, because upon an initial viewing, it is a bit hard to follow and hard to understand. Now, granted, some of it might be because I watched it over the course of 3 different nights, and I need to actually watch it in a continuous fashion, and maybe it'll make more sense, especially after this discussion. So I almost need to withhold my score or give it a tentative score of say a 6 or 6.5, with potential for additional revision of that score upon another viewing or two of this film. But I really appreciate you bringing this as a suggestion, because I think it does have so much stuff going on, and it brings up so many different things to discuss. And we had a bunch of different little rabbit trails to go down in our discussion that interweaved libertarian ideas and economic theory that is just right up our alley for this show. So thank you for that, Olaf. And so I'm going to go with 6.5 at this point. So 8.5 for you, and we'll go to Robert.
So Spirited Away, it reminds me of another very, very famous anime. My experience with it is very similar, although I think I like the other anime better. It's the everyone knows the name Akira. So Akira, I remember when I first watched that movie back in the late 80s when it first came out on home video in the United States, and I was just blown away because I'm a huge art fan. Love the line art, the frames per second. Akira's so kinetic, the action. And I'm sitting there watching Akira and just loving it, loving the whole thing. I've seen it multiple times. But I remember one night I had some roommates and we were all sitting around and we wanted to watch a movie. And I'm like, let's watch Akira. And about halfway through the film, I could tell everybody else was just tuning out. Everyone else was bored. They couldn't really follow the story. They just lost interest in the movie. And I didn't really know why at the time, but I think it's the same thing that happens in this movie. Is that there isn't a clear objective for the protagonist, or at least the protagonist isn't actively working towards that goal the entire time. And I know it's kind of like a Japanese storytelling style difference than there is in the West, but I think that's why this genre, or at least anime in general, appeals to certain people more than others. Like there are just some people who like anime who are like, I don't get it. It's not for me. It looks cool, but I fall asleep watching this stuff. And I think it's just the way that Chihiro, she's got this problem, but then she just kind of goes and wanders off and does other stuff. And so even today, when I was watching the film, I found myself, well, I got some other things I can do while I leave it on. And that's kind of bad. It really, you should be engaging your audience the entire time. And maybe it engages other people the entire time, and it's just not quite for everybody. And that's fine. So for a movie like this, for me and Akira, it's great. Although I'd say this isn't as good as Akira for me. I mean, because I'm a guy and I like all the cool action and the monsters and stuff. But for me, as an anime type oriented person with the love of the art, and I even like the Japanese storytelling. It's not what I would do per se, but I appreciate what they're doing, and I appreciate that it works for them and their culture, and it obviously works for millions of people around the world that love it. But I think it would work better for Western audiences in general if you didn't kind of have this kind of meandering, and I don't mean it meandering, like just kind of like, not super directed, like not necessarily a straight arrow for the protagonist, take some twists and turns and do some other things, but always be working towards that goal. Always be working towards some specific, clear end goal that the audience can wrap their heads around and get on board with what's going on inside that character's head. Like, I got this goal. How am I going to achieve it? Okay, I'm going to go on this journey with this person and see how they get that done. That's interesting. But when they're not even working towards that goal, kind of seems like they don't care about it. And if they don't care about the end goal in the movie, then I, as the audience, don't care about the end goal of the movie, and I lose interest. And so I think that happens for a lot of people. Even though I think Miyazaki, he's a master. Studio Ghibli has put out tons of amazing good stuff, but this movie isn't my favorite of theirs, and probably for this reason. So I think it's a great film. I'm going to give it like a 7, maybe a 7.3, 7.4. But for those reasons, it's not a masterpiece for me. But I really do appreciate the conversation from Olaf and his perspective that he brought to this. I really enjoy the Shinto stuff. The Shinto stuff that appears in like Princess Mononoke, I think is also fantastic. So that's a lot of fun. And then of course the economic discussion and the environmental type stuff. That's all really cool. So that's it for me. Thanks, everybody. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and quite a specific score there, Robert. And don't forget to mention the racism that we talked about, because I think that's actually very important. It's a very important distinction for the free market, that it would be the costs of it would be borne by the individuals perpetrating it. And so I think that's very, very insightful and beneficial for those who advocate for the free market. But I want to start to wind this down here. So thank you, Olaf, for being our guest. We're going to be back with another show next week. I know it's hard to imagine we're so consistent. We do a show every week, but we will have someone who wants to do another anime with us at some point, though we can't do 2 animes back to back. But at some point in the future, we're going to do Cowboy Beebop with this person. He is Anarchist Luke Tatum. But instead of another anime, we're going to do Dune with him, the David Lynch film, starring the mayor of Portland, Kyle, what's his name? McClanahan, something like that.
That's like the original Dune movie?
The original Dune movie, The Spice.
With Sting?
With Sting and The Spice.
Snaps. All right.
Yeah, it's going to be good. He's actually read the novel, and so he's going to have a lot of insight to bring to this. So that's going to be the show next week, Dune with Anarchist Luke Tatum. And then at some point in the future after that, the next anime film we do will probably be a Cowboy Bebop with Luke Tatum again. But Olaf, I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of The Last Nighters, talking about Spirited Away. This is episode 91. It can be found at the Launchpad Media and also at lastnighters.com/91. And Robert, what prizes can people win if they want to support us in particular ways?
Well, they get all the pats on the backs and the shout outs and the good feels. They can leave a review on the iTunes or the iPad or the whatever kind of iDevice you have. You can leave a comment. You can subscribe to us on the YouTubes. Leave a comment on the YouTubes. You can watch us live. You can support us on Patreon. You can talk about us. You can talk about us on the Facebook. You can join up on our Facebook group and interact with us there. That'll be good times.
Yeah, and we'll give a gateway to all those things at our show notes page at lastnighters.com/91. So, Olaf, thanks again, and I will say good night from last night, everyone.
Thank you.
In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.